And by the way, like I would not have a problem if we like made this wholesale decision to go back to analog capacities. You can say like, oh, analog won't do the trick, et cetera. There are places where analog really works, right?
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the US Department of Defense each year. But so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Scheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley.
Joshua Steinman is a force of nature, a retired naval officer, entrepreneur, and senior director for cybersecurity during the first Trump administration. Josh was responsible for all things cyber, telecom, crypto, and supply chain policy on the National Security Council staff. Today, Josh is the CEO and co-founder of Galvanick, a startup working to secure the industrial control systems that power our economy. The LA-based company believes that America's defense industrial base includes not only the companies building our weapons and defenses, but all those companies that touch the infrastructure on which we rely day to day. If you follow him on X, you know that Josh has spicy takes on all things hiring, management, and national security. So I was excited to sit down with him at Manifest Demo Day for a broad discussion of the meaning of the defense industrial base, his lessons from the first Trump administration, and to learn about how Galvanick is crossing the valley in one of the existential fights of our day. Enjoy. All right. Welcome back, everyone, to Manifest Demo Day, where I'm joined now by Joshua Steinman, the CEO and co-founder of Galvanick. Josh, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thanks, Noah. It's great to be here. And Mike's put on an amazing event, and we're just excited to be invited.
It's pretty cool to see. I mean, even when you were in the White House a few years ago, I'm not sure if they'd thrown a party like this, that you'd have 35 companies and hundreds of government PEOs or defense DoD PEOs and end users showing up for something like this.
I'll do you one better. So back in 2013, I was on active duty and I didn't know him at the time, but now one of my best friends, Ben Coleman, wrote an article that was called "The Military Needs More Disruptive Thinkers." And it was one of the all-time most viewed articles on War on the Rocks, which is at the time was a small defense blog. Chief of Naval Operations read the article, and Ben, who was a lieutenant F-18 fighter pilot at the time, calls Ben up and is like, "Come see me," which is like Zeus descending from on high into the exurbs of Rome and finding some, peasant farmer and part-time hoplite and saying, come serve at the royal court. So CNO has Ben come and basically is like, look, I have fears that, the Navy isn't going to be prepared for the next conflict. I want you to work with, and he assigned a 3-star to work with Ben. Go find me 10 heretics from the Navy and go out and find asymmetric opportunities for us. And through a random series of events, actually a friend of mine introduced us, who later became a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Simone Ledeen, introduced me to Ben, and I was one of those 10 heretics. And 2013, 2014, 2015, we were all military officers and enlisted. And we were just going around running experiments for the Chief of Naval Operations and finding interesting opportunities. And if you had told me then, and that's 10 plus years ago, that we would be here today, I would have told you that qualified as ultimate success. Because we were staring at, military, and those of us that had gone to the wars in the Middle East kind of knew like we basically lost by that point. And not lost in terms of like, defeated on the battlefield, but defeated strategically. Like there hadn't been the will to see victory through to the end. But we knew it. It was like a demoralized group, and we saw, the conflicts coming on the horizon. And this is what we knew needed to happen. New technologies, cutting edge stuff brought into the DoD. 10 years. And many of the people that were here today, including Mike himself, were around at the beginning in those early days. So I really credit him, Mike, and many of the entrepreneurs here and folks like obviously Palmer and Trey and Schimpf and Grimm and the guys that have built Anduril and all these other companies. But it really is amazing to see, and I can like look back on it. I'm like the old man at this point, right? And I'm like looking back and it's like, wow, and not to say that any one person or group of people is responsible, but certainly it was a small group of us at the beginning over a decade ago. And it really, a lot has happened since then.
I mean, perseverance is probably half the battle, if not more. We had Colonel Jason Brown on here earlier also, and you think about someone who's in it at the earliest days, 48th inside, and then coming outside and continuing to contribute on both sides. I think that's sort of what I think defines this ecosystem today, is that you have people who are able to contribute to the mission from multiple different vantage points. And like when the mission ends maybe in uniform, there are ample opportunities to continue to wage that fight on the civilian side. And even now, investors who prioritize that experience and say, actually, it is people who have lived those missions that need to be the ones building those problems.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that a defense tech company can be built by anybody, but at the same time, I think having empathy for the users is something that really helps accelerate a process.
Yep.
And therefore, it can really help if you get someone who knows what they're doing.
I think about the Matt Pottinger, Mike Flynn fixing Intel days, with General McChrystal, as similarly, right? It's just someone who's an astute observer of kind of human nature and what's going on in the world. And Matt's,
deep pull.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Matt's one of the people I respect most in the entire space. So it's
that's great. I was deployed when that article came out and had some connectivity to some of those people, not to be discussed here, but at the time, who knows what I was doing? But yeah, that article was a lightning bolt. And yeah, amazing.
We won't go too deep down that rabbit hole, but I think suffice to say, it's that combination of inside and outside that I think make things happen. So let's talk about what we're doing here today. You gave it a demo. I've heard you do it in other forums, but help us just, because I think it's the right way to start these conversations with the why. Yeah. What is the problem that you saw from your position inside the White House? And most importantly, why was that something that you saw yourself in? Why is that the problem that you decided to devote the next chunk of your life to solving?
Yeah, so the problem of connected technologies is one that actually predates my time at the White House. So it actually goes back to that task force where I was working on asymmetric opportunities for the Navy, where one of my colleagues on that task force was really focused at this intersection of what we call operational technology, OT, or in a DoD parlance, they'll call it things like platform information technology, like a ship or an airplane that has computers on board that are actually controlling the mechanism. 50 years ago, all that would have been analog, mechanical, and now it's been intermediated, right? Digital systems. So the thesis of whether or not you can take those digital tendrils and make them do things that they aren't supposed to do is not new. There's been unclassified work going back many years. There's a project at Idaho National Lab called Aurora, where a researcher actually passed away due to cancer a few years ago named Mike Asante, introduced malicious code into a piece of energy infrastructure and caused it to explode. And that was over 10 years ago, I think 15 years ago at this point, something like that. And there's been a lot of activity in that world ever since. I was exposed to some of it when I was in the military, enough that when Mike Flynn asked me to join the National Security Council during the presidential transition in 2016, I guess he would have asked in January early 2017, like the 3rd or something like that. But I said I would take the job on one condition, that I had to go get one person out of the Department of Defense and bring them to come work with me at the White House. And I did, who is one of the world's experts in this area. We spent 4 years trying to buy down the risks and do some other things as well, but buy down the risks, cyber risks to industrial infrastructure, both inside the Department of Defense and outside. And so it was that experience in the military, that relationship that I then carried to the White House, and the vulnerabilities that I knew very intimately that drove that activity for 4 years. And then afterwards, left that job, and another good friend of mine, Brandon Park, my co-founder, CTO, another co-founder, Felix Blazinski, there's 3 of us, but Brandon had stood up Amazon's global industrial control systems cybersecurity shop, and we just started
undertaking.
Yeah, small undertaking, 4 people, 700 facilities or something like that, as he likes to say. And we put our heads together and we're just like, hey, how can we go about solving this problem? And that has essentially led us to where we are today.
And you're about 3 years in now?
Yeah, just over 3 years in. And yeah, it's a small team, 14 people, but we've got some amazing customers, including some of the biggest companies in the world that are using us to protect critical manufacturing facilities that they have, and will be moving out into other industries as well, infrastructure, energy, et cetera.
So let's, especially because the focus on this program, we call it Crossing the Valley. Obviously, there's not one valley of death, whether it's commercial or defense sales. There's many, as we know. Help situate us kind of where on the journey are you right now as a company? However you want to characterize that.
Yeah. So the product works. It's deployable in a repeatable fashion. We have customers. It's being used. It does exactly what we say it's supposed to do. We can actually deploy pretty quickly. Our last deployment to a manufacturing facility, we did in 2.5 hours.
Wow.
So super quick. So, if we were to talk about technology readiness levels in the private sector, TRL 8, TRL 9, there are some things that we still want to validate. Like one of the novel things that we're doing is giving folks the ability to operate multiple facilities and keep a sort of digital overwatch over not only individual facilities, but multiple facilities at once. So we're in the process of working with one of our customers to expand to that. So maybe if you want to say TRL 8, and once they get to multi-facility, you'll be TRL 9, sure. And for the folks that don't speak that sort of hyper governmental contracting line actually came out of NASA, I think, TRLs. With that working product, we're out talking to folks inside the Department of Defense right now and have not yet deployed to a DoD facility. But with a TRL 8/TRL 9 product in the commercial sector, I think you'd probably say we're at like, I don't know, TRL 5 or TRL 6. We are deployed on one of our customers' GovCloud instances. So really it's a question of getting what we call ATO, authority to operate, going through the processes and procedures to allow us to get there. There won't be any significant technical work that we'll have to do to get to the place where we can say, oh, TRL 8 inside USG.
Yeah. So as you describe that kind of go-to-market strategy, it sounds like it is a primarily, if not entirely, commercial first strategy. Is that fair characterization?
Right. Yeah.
Talk us through, as somebody who's deeply familiar with the government side of things, how did you come up with that strategy? What was the reason for it?
I think it's at least not having done a government first company, I felt more comfortable. My co-founders felt more comfortable starting with the private sector. We thought we would just have tighter feedback loops. Even now, it's challenging because, finding early customers on the government side, inside the Department of Defense, like those folks aren't, maybe they should be, but they're not writing requirements. They're not procuring. And so the fact that you have that split, to me, as someone trying to drive an organization towards product market fit, I just didn't think that that's where we should invest our first sort of slug of energy.
Yeah. Is there a threshold, or how are you thinking about the moment when, if you believe that it's the right decision, the moment when you would start to think about federal?
I mean, we're starting to think about federal right now. And so we've gone out and we're starting to talk with some of the PEOs, some of the shops that buy big programs inside the DoD for folks that don't speak that language, coming to events like this to talk to users and talk to buyers. I have a pretty good network in cyber DoD, and we're out talking to those folks that I know and trying to connect with folks who, are in charge of those cyber protection teams or in charge of, those missions and those organizations. So just now starting to do that.
Maybe help paint the vision for everyone here and then I'm going to ask you a totally unfair question.
Yeah.
But first, let's start with the vision of when Galvanick is radically successful.
Yep.
What does that look like for the commercial and the defense or the federal sectors, and how do those kind of fit together?
We'll just take a step back. So there's less than 10,000 Americans that are, conversant in operational technology, cybersecurity. And I think where we're going to go with this conversation is we're going to talk about why that's a problem.
Yeah.
Why it could be a problem in the future. So many companies out there that have complex industrial facilities that they own, operate, or rely on are now in the process of, and their boards are in the process of thinking about, hey, how do we build this competency in-house? And they're running smack into this challenge of like, it's very hard to hire these people. And the jobs that they do today are incredibly monotonous, like the worst kind of control F that you could ever imagine. Just like finding an IP address and then going to like 17 different databases and like, hey, is this thing shown up somewhere else? Control F, Control F. It's not fun. It's not engaging. And it really makes it hard to hire folks to do these jobs at critical companies and in the Department of Defense in order to defend these facilities and infrastructures. So what does it look like is that, the system that we've built, that Brandon and the engineering team have built, cuts a lot of that out. We essentially absorb data sources from across an industrial infrastructure and then, do sort of like computational math, correlate those activities together and compress all of those things down. So as we see activity happening on these industrial infrastructures in real time, we're generating full investigations like in real time, things that would have taken hours, days, weeks, maybe even months to like go around, call someone up at a facility. Hey, can you go pull logs from this like CNC machine we have operating in this like strange corner of the building, like building 2? Like, how do I pull a log? The guy's like, how do I pull a log? Well, you take a thumb drive. Where do we have a thumb drive from? Like whatever, however that process would work. Like these investigations take a long time to put together. We're doing those instantaneously. We're delivering them to the defenders. And it's like, hey, like not only did this weird IP address just, query this and whatever it is, but we're going to give you the full context around everything that that machine has talked to, what was given to that machine, like, what packets hit, moved over the wire, what applications were used to deliver them. Like, was it Studio 5000? Was it the thing that you're supposed to use when you tell that machine to do something new? Or was it notepad.exe? Because if it was notepad.exe, the one time out of a million, like that's the one time you actually care about. If it's everything, it's almost anything else. It's like routine maintenance event. So we do all that. We do all that in real time. And we think that it's transformative for the folks that are required that, to be cyber defenders, where that's their job or that's their mission. They're in the Department of Defense. And we think it really transforms what those folks end up doing. And it makes them much more effective. And honestly, it just makes the job better, right? Like you aren't searching for the needle in the needle stack. You're like actually going out and doing things. So that's what we do. Why is it important? Because this is the fight. And like, it's very hard to explain that to folks, but you can read the DNI's annual threat assessment, Director of National Intelligence. You can read testimony given to other congressional committees. You can go out and read the newspaper, read the Wall Street Journal, read about Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, Typhoon families, likely, indicating that it's of Chinese origin. Like find out what these people are hacking. Where are they going? Critical infrastructure, big manufacturing companies, small manufacturing companies. Like the fight is happening right now. And the thing is, like, when it actually happens, when everybody realizes, like, oh, geez, this is actually happening right now, it's too late. And so what does it look like? What does Galvanick look like at scale? It's this capacity to actually provide a protective bubble and perception around, like, what is happening on these critical networks in near real time. And the fact that we can see that across our customer base, and we can use that to drive proactivity is, I think, the only way in which you're going to be able to defend these types of systems at scale.
I'm struck by, especially given where you've been in the different positions, like the fact that you're choosing to work on something that at first blush might seem, oh, well, this is outside of the direct, what people call the defense industrial base. It's like, well, okay, well, industrial base how, right? I think that when you hear about even the conversation today around things like, I don't know, TikTok, and people saying, well, why do I care that the CCP, they have my information anywhere? Why do we care that it's young people? Why would we care that all that information is compromised? I come back to, I think it's a failure of imagination.
Yeah.
I think we as a country suffer the same failures that the government suffered on 9/11, which is like, we can't put ourselves in a long-term longitudinal kind of mindset of maybe having information on someone when they're 16 is going to be really useful when they're 22 or 25, or that can be used in other ways to compromise these systems. And so I think that the target that you're after of, hey, I think to use your words, the soft underbelly of the American economy, not even the economy, just our way of life, all of the systems that allow us to live the way that we do, it's very, very hard to show somebody that that is a problem until it is. And so I'm kind of curious. I mean, I know you had talked earlier today about why this matters in a place like Taiwan. And I'm curious if maybe you want to share some of that to make it real.
Yeah, think of it this way. Like, you have to ask and go through the thought process of like, why do we have a defense industrial base? People say, oh, you make military platforms to allow us to protect the country. Okay, protect the country in what type of a scenario? Oh, okay. A scenario where, we might have to, try and defend the island of Formosa against invasion by the Chinese Communist Party, defend Taiwan. Okay, got it. As you go down that thought pathway, what you realize is that a defense industrial base doesn't actually exist unless it is secure or protected against cyber threats, because a compromised facility that is exposed to sabotage, digital sabotage, compromised systems that are exposable to sabotage will not function at the exact moment where they must. So like, what good is a platform if it doesn't work? What good is a critical infrastructure if it won't function under stress? And the answer is like, yeah, it's great 99% of the time. But like, oh yeah, we got this, imagine you're a football team and it's like, got this amazing draft pick, amazing quarterback, go through the season, guy's a stud, putting up the right numbers. And then like you get to the playoffs and like he's a complete zero. It's like, well, what was the whole point? Like go day was like last week, man.
Yep.
Like the guy's just sitting on the bench, like refuses to get off, doesn't function. It's like, all right, I guess this was a total waste of time. And so, this point that I made, all this was live streamed, but we tell this joke, like, how do you know when China's going to invade Taiwan? And the answer is like, oh, the traffic lights on Oahu stop working. Man, it's really hard for all those sailors to get back to their boats. Gee, now they're wondering if like their kids are going to have water in the morning. Oh, time to get underway. Time to start going. The power just went out on the island. Like you just run through these scenarios of what this actually looks like. It gets dark fast.
Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, turns out refrigerator stopped working. 5 days of food left on the island. Oh yeah. All steam towards the South China, full ahead to the South China Sea. Like, okay. So how do we think about modern conflict? Like the Chinese Communist Party absolutely wants to throw sand in the gears of a decision process. Right. And they want to delay. They don't want those ships to get out of the harbor. They don't want those traffic lights to work. They don't want the water to work. They don't want the power to work. They want there to be significant delays. They got things going. They're dropping those landing barges. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's been 72 hours. Guess what? We've landed, 4 infantry divisions in Taipei. And, feel free to come on out. We'll see you in a few days and we'll have set up new, it's over. Whole thing's over. And I'm not saying that we should or should not, get involved in those conflicts. But the whole point is like, if you don't even want to have the option, then like, okay, don't build an infrastructure to have the option.
Yep.
Right? Don't build a military to have the option. Don't make diplomatic representations about, what we will or won't do in contingency. But if you're going to do it, like freaking do it.
The option value, I think, is really important. And the other side of that is like, somebody who's being manipulated will never admit to being manipulated. Like who wants to admit that, right? There's whether it's because this is a bad idea to get involved or it's because, hey, look, you've got these problems here that you guys have to deal with. Why are you going to come, go over there?
Yeah. And like, look, I'm not sitting in my old office, my old boss, the former and current president of the United States, like it would be his decision. And, it's not even getting into that. But it's like the purpose of a Department of Defense, the purpose of a Department of Navy is have the ability. Yeah, exactly. These are the options.
Yep.
We can go, we cannot go. What do you want to do, Mr. Commander-in-Chief, Mr.
Yep.
President of the United States, duly elected? If you can't actually present genuine options, like go home. Let someone else build a Navy. Let someone else build
So what do you think? Are we going to be ready in time?
I don't know, man.
But you got a fighting chance.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. It's like, I think we have to get serious. I think all the things that are happening now, whether it's the Doge activity, whether it's cuts to certain things that are going on, like there needs to be a reckoning. Like the problems, and I can talk about OT cyber insofar as things have been, disclosed through the various legal processes. It's a real problem. There's a reason why I'm doing this with like my life.
Yeah.
Right. Read the NDAA for the past 9 years, and you'll see that Congress is paying a lot of attention to the cybersecurity of military platforms, of critical infrastructure, et cetera. It's a big problem. I probably sound like I'm self-dealing here. Like it doesn't get resourced the way that it should. Sure, everyone that comes in here that has a defense company says something like that. Unmanned doesn't get resourced like it should. Mm-hmm. Fires coordination. Artillery doesn't get resourced the way that it should. It's a real problem. Everyone, it's really sexy to go out and talk about whiz bang gizmos that, make things go boom. Defense is something that it just doesn't get the kind of attention that I think it needs. And I think it's going to need that amount of attention if we want to genuinely have the ability to represent a capacity to project force in the future.
Defense is a tricky one too, because I think the more you talk about it, the more folks are kind of curious what kind of defenses people have. And so then they learn, it's a very much a catch-22 problem. But yeah, I think like you got to do the work. You got to be in the fight. Otherwise, why,
And by the way, like I would not have a problem if we like made this wholesale decision to go back to analog capacities, right? Now, I'm not sure that that's the
as a contingency redundancy or as a primary.
Either way, like there's ways to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Obviously, with like 21st century ISR capabilities, with the various letters that they like tack onto that thing, C5, ISRT, whatever. You can say like, oh, analog won't do the trick, et cetera. There are places where analog really works, right? Critical infrastructure, I think, really important. But no one's even wants to have that hard conversation, which I think we should, and like certainly talked about and tried to advance when I was in the seat last time. But yeah, the question is like, are we having an honest conversation about like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities?
COBOL-based code is protecting the nuclear infrastructure.
Look, there when people are like, oh, the old ways are the good ways, like there are certain times when like that is absolutely true. I can't speak to any specific program or things like that, but security through obscurity or like the fact that these things are straight up, you know, again, not talking about any specific program, but certain things can be done in a very manual way. Like, yeah, I think can be pretty good.
Okay, ready for an unfair question?
Yeah, please.
So let's assume it's I don't know, what was the year? 2011, 2012, and Galvanick is installed in Natanz or whatever Iranian nuclear facility. When Olympic Games and Stuxnet and all that stuff is on the loose. What happens?
Yeah, so sorry guys, go try again. No, literally, but it's like what are we doing? Those are Siemens programmable logic controllers. Where are they getting instructions from? Are they getting it from the Siemens software? No, I'm pretty sure there were data moving around that network introduced by an outside party is something that we absolutely would detect. And if there's anyone and the various places that may or may not have actually generated all those activities, please do reach out, and I'd love to go toe-to-toe against them.
There it is.
Yeah, please.
Galvanick.com.
Yeah, let's go, boys. Whoever you may be, absolutely, let's rumble.
Well, you have talked a little bit about the team building side of things, and one of the past interviews that I really enjoyed is you talked about your time at the White House. And everybody wants to work for you, and everybody, and especially we're here in Washington, everybody wants to talk about who you work for, and there's a lot of these status games that get played, and you quote that, do you want to be somebody or do you want to do something? And I'm curious because you said right now a team is small. I'm sure you could have raised way more money if you wanted to. You've got a great background for it. I think it's really interesting to talk just for a minute or two about the company building process and how you think about each marginal hire at this early kind of formative stage. And if there's, in your mind, kind of the mental model for how you, are there companies that you're emulating, or is there a model that you're emulating as you think about this thing that you're putting together?
So first, I have to give credit where credit is due. My co-founder, Brandon, who runs our engineering team, who, like I said, was one of the first hires on that Amazon global OT cybersecurity team, has done a really excellent job. We, just so happens many of his former colleagues, some of whom were at Amazon, some of whom had moved on, have basically come back. They've reassembled their old team inside Galvanick and then gone out and find a bunch of other folks that they like and respect from SpaceX, from Mandiant, and a few other places. And so I think the way that we think about this is we don't hire until there's like a lot of pain. And we've even talked about this, and we have open loops with folks where it's like, we want to get to know them. We think there might be a place for them. And the question is like, do we have conviction around that yet? And if not, we're going to go through that process, gain confidence in their capabilities. And then, we'll see if there's something that we want to do maybe now, maybe later. And so we're just very slow to hire. Brandon says this thing all the time, and I feel that way as well. But every new hire you're making before 50 people, basically betting the company on. And I try and be very respectful. Before people join the company, I take them for a walk. And we do the thing that I did at the National Security Council where we write out their specific responsibilities, like the thing that no one else is going to do except for them. Write it out on an index card. That's part of the interview process. It's like, what are you going to do if you come here? Literally, just tell me, what are you going to do? I take folks for walks before we give them an offer. And I'm like, look, I don't know whether or not you have it within you to do these things. Really only you do, right? We can interview you. We can try and pattern match. We can do technical evaluations. But at the end of the day, you need to make a decision inside your soul. Am I literally up for this? Because no one's going to do this stuff if you don't. And if you're not doing it, we will fire you fast. So if you can't, please do not take this job that we are going to offer you. That's what I tell people. And we have separated people, and they're nice people, right? And they're competent. And I liked them as human beings. But if they can't do the thing that we've both agreed, you're going to come on and you're going to do X, That's not what we're here to do. That's not what our investors have asked us to spend their money to do. And so we just try and do that as well. And we think that that's the most respectful thing as well, is like you just have to separate people fast. And that's nothing novel, right? Like I've learned that from other entrepreneurs that I like and respect, but especially because I don't say this lightly, but like we're protecting manufacturing facilities that build products that people trust with their lives, like on a daily basis. And we have gotten to that point because we are meticulous and not to say slow, but cautious. And like we can be a startup and we can, do all the things that people like to say startups do, like move fast, et cetera. But like at the end of the day, we've got a small group of people that understand that there is a lot on the line, not just for our customers, but for their customers.
Yep.
And when I go in and talk to executives, when I bring our engineering team in and talk to executives, when they're doing like code level reviews of like everything that we're doing, architectural reviews, integration plan reviews, et cetera, like those people are trusting us with their careers at these companies that are like zero fail companies, right? And I think if you look back on the team, like what's the experience that almost every person has? It's operating in zero failure environments. And like I have that from my military and White House time. Brandon absolutely has that. As a CTO, he cut his teeth in vaccine manufacturing, controls and automations in vaccine manufacturing, like zero fail. And the same thing with Felix, he's a hedge fund trader. And so I've been impressed and very proud of our team because in many of the sort of casual after actions with the executives of companies that we're dealing with, like they will pull me aside and be like, your guys know their stuff. Like cold. And like, that's what it takes in order to be trusted to deploy things. And we deploy incredibly like as passively as you can, which is what you have to have in these types of environments, because God forbid and there hasn't been, but we don't want a failure on our part to be a failure on the customer's part. Right. So fail open and all these other, things that folks do in that space. And so we've meticulously engineered our platform to be as safe as it possibly can be. And we say that, but then, you go through the technical reviews with folks and they pull you aside and they're like, yeah, like you guys get it. And it's one of the proudest moments for me as a co-founder of this company is hearing that, not from someone that like, I think we're doing that. Our CTO thinks we're doing that. Our team thinks that we're doing that. That's our assessment of reality.
Right.
And then like you go up against someone who is like, it must be the case. And they're putting everything they can into like trying to find out if we're doing what we say we are, and we are. And they're like, okay, yeah, that's my assessment as well.
So there was the one other kind of piece I was going to ask you as we draw towards a close here is like, you talked about the difficulty of defense and even the mission assurance of all of this. It's like, how do folks know that you are doing what you say you're doing? Are you guys bringing in external red teams? Are they hiring external? Like, how are you able to communicate the value when the value is of something not happening?
Yeah, it's one of the interesting aspects of working in the security space. Now, the interesting part is in OT cyber, actually, there's a lot that we can show our customers and do show our customers when we get onto those networks. In many cases, these networks are not observed the way that IT networks are. And so often when we deploy to places, you can show them things in real time. So, obfuscate a lot, but one of our customers had one of their OEMs come in and do some maintenance on a critical machine. And we were able to follow that maintenance process like incredibly granularly in a way in which previously that customer would have only known like, oh, this person badged in at this time and it's a written logbook and badged out at this time. That's it. Oh, no, we saw everything that was happening on the workstation. We saw every packet that came off of that machine, everything. And we're able to show that. And it's like, look, this is what we're seeing with everything, this level of visibility. And then, there are other things that we can see that we are able to use to demonstrate. We caught someone's red team one time. That's like another example. We were deployed on some telecom infrastructure. And their engineer, we were like on the phone with their engineering team and like, hey, have you seen, X, Y, or Z? People start freaking out. They're like, what do you mean? I shouldn't be there. And like, a week later, executive team came in. They were like, oh yeah, we'd hired, a pen test and these guys caught it. So like there are incidents like that where we can use to demonstrate value. But yeah, I mean, the problem with OT cyber is in many cases, I'm sure there are cases where I'm wrong here. The ops are long duration. So you're seeing things happen at a very slow pace. Maybe faster, but the whole point is like, it's not in the movies where, there's like one guy on a laptop and like 30 seconds later, like boom, everything goes. It's like these things take a while. It is a more challenging process, but like I said, when you're talking to folks at the cutting edge of manufacturing, deeply understand, how these systems work. There are ways in which we can communicate, value that I think, shows why they should continue to do business with us.
Yep. No, I mean, it's just knowing your business and being able to communicate and quantify the impact. Super important. Let me ask you one fun question, and then we'll wrap here.
Yeah.
Galvanick. What's the name?
I'm gonna not answer that question because I like finding the people that know.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Good deal. No, you're good. If folks want to follow along on the story, on the mission, or curious about learning more about the company, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, probably X at Galvanic Co. is the best way to do that. My X happens to be a little spicier. I've sort of leaned into my former job a little bit, but all in good faith. Hopefully folks take it that way. But X is great. We'll post some of the video from today. We'll post some of the slides. We did a great 90-second ad as well that we'll be posting, and keep up with us that way. We try and be pretty open. I put out quarterly reports to both our investors and supporters. And it's all there.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, thanks for all of your service in many different capacities and for joining us here today.